it here in writing kind of why we were making the change that we made. And it's actually a change that teachers at Centennial have wanted to do for quite some time. As you know, teachers go through professional development all of the time, and many of our teachers have been working on advanced degrees over the last few years. And they've had a little bit of a hard time when they go and they learn about multi-leveled instruction and differentiation and all these things, and then come back to our school with a strategy that was used to separate students by ability, and then to see what happens in those classes, that they're classes that don't represent the whole of our school from both our gender and our racial demographics. And they've been struggling with that for some time. So last year, as we really started delving into that and looking at the best practice of instruction for language arts, and working with Jonathan, who also is part-time district content specialist, with all of that is where we kind of went around, because we wanted to do what we believed was best for kids. And so it was in that light, bringing together what we have learned, what the experts have learned who teach your children, to do what's best for kids. So Angel's going to move forward now and talk about how that connects with the district's curriculum.
Thank you and welcome. I'm very glad to be here and I appreciate being invited. I want to make sure that you do have the materials that we're going to be talking about, and watch out for propelling objects. So if you would make sure that you have one of the handouts from the back, and then also have note cards with you. And as we go along, we wanted to provide you as much time for as much information as we can. So we do ask that as you have any questions or comments, please do put those on the note cards. And as we break into the four corners, that's a time to ask questions, as well as giving them to us at the end so that we can continue to look at those and meet your needs. So one of the questions that parents have asked is, what does the structure look like for language arts classes across the district? So we've provided some information for you on that. You'll see that along the left side, you have each of our middle schools, and then how they are currently structured as of this fall. There have been some shifts throughout the years, just as we're shifting here at Centennial. And as you can see, there are many schools that have the mixed language arts classes in all 3 grades. There's some of our middle schools that offer mixed language arts classes in 6th grade and have separate advanced classes for 7th and 8th. And then there are a few that are offering separate advanced language arts classes in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So again, you can see at this time, it is very varied. We've spent the past 2 years in discussions, in looking at research, in teachers taking some professional learning classes to really work through what we would see as high leverage strategies to meet the needs of all learners, including students who have advanced skills in language arts. Please note the note. We do have a district curriculum council, and that's there are representatives from each of the middle schools. And recently there has been a consideration to begin a process to create a proposal for some consistency across all of our schools to use a mixed level service model. So as we talk about our structure across all of the schools, we'll also look at the process within each of our schools. Let's first start with what's common regarding our standards and our curriculum. In 2012, our State Board of Education adopted new standards, the Colorado Academic Standards. At that time then, every district in Colorado created a curriculum, and it was created for every content area and every grade level. So our teachers have been using that curriculum to meet the needs of our students through instructional planning since 2012. We also have a set of materials that have been approved for use across our district. But in every school, teachers have choice of which texts they'll be using. It's a vast list of titles, and teachers, again, look at the needs of their students, discuss what topics they're going to use for incorporating our process skills and language arts, and select texts. So there's choice in each building for the materials, but the curriculum is the same no matter which building our students are in. Then we also offer training so that teachers can learn to use those materials, adjust their instruction for learning to occur for all students. Let's take a minute to look at our curriculum, and you have a copy in your handout as well. I'm going to walk through one example and then give you a few minutes to look at the example that you have. So this is 7th grade. It would be part of our 7th grade curriculum for language arts for advanced learners and in our standard class. Notice the structure. There's bold print and there's regular font. This is from our Reading for All Purposes, or Standard 2 of our curriculum document. And in it, you'll see prepared graduates. Those prepared graduate statements are what we expect students to be able to achieve at the end of their career with us. So that is by the end of 12th grade, we would expect students to have met that prepared graduate standard. Then we have grade level expectations. So in 7th grade, there are a list of expectations. In this case, the concepts and skills that need to be mastered are to use information from text to support analysis and personal responses to literature and poetry. That's the 7th grade expectation. Then under that, you have the standards broken out even in more detail. And those are the key ideas and details. You'll see them in the document you have too. In this example, there are 4 different detailed standards. You'll notice the bold print within each. The bold print is what is expected of our advanced learners in 7th grade. So all students in 7th grade, for example A, all students are expected to cite several pieces of textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. Every learner in 7th grade, in every one of our language arts classes, needs to meet that expectation. For advanced learners, they must also distinguish between a strong and weak inference. So within our curriculum document, we have one curriculum document that represents both the standard expectations as well as what advanced learners need to be meeting. Take a minute to look at the example that you have. You have a reading example and you have a writing example. Take a few minutes to get familiar with it and look for what is expected of all and expected of our advanced learners. So this is what you have. And again, you have the prepared graduate statement. By the end of a student's career in BBSD, they need to meet those prepared graduate expectations. And all teachers from preschool through 12th grade have that end goal in their curriculum. Then there are the grade level expectations. As you can see on yours, and you can see up here, that is in the gray. Every student needs to master that grade level expectation. And this is a 7th grade example. Then on the left-hand side, you have the evidence outcomes. Again, what do all students have to master? Each of those standards that are listed below, each of those grade level expectations or evidence outcomes, what is not in bold is what's expected of all learners. What you see in bold is what we expect as extended learning for students with strong language arts skills. Same document, same grade level expectations, same graduate level prepared graduate expectation, same key ideas, yet we go a little deeper, extend the learning for students that are coming to us with strong language arts skills. When our teachers use the curriculum document to plan, they are looking at this same document as they're planning for any standard class or any class that's an advanced, listed as an advanced class, or for our mixed level classes. Students are needing to meet those same expectations, and teachers have these in front of them so they can see, how do I need to shift? What do I need to do in the classroom instruction to ensure that students have control over those skills? Again, we have these for reading, and then you also have a writing example. It's a support for teachers as they're planning for all students to have what needs to be for students more advanced, what they need to be mastering. So I wanted you to see that this is the same curriculum in every one of our middle level 7th grade classrooms. This is the expectation for every child, and then the bold are for students that are coming to us with strong language arts skills. Let's look at the how now. As we move into the process, we're asking that question, so how do we meet those standards? How do we use those materials in order for students to show control over those skills? And we focus both on the academic and the relationships. So it's social, emotional, and academic skills. Having our mixed level language arts classes allows for us to have all learners together sharing their knowledge and experiences. And our goal is academic success and success as a human being in social development. So those are some of the shifts that have occurred in language arts over the years. And what you would see in mixed level language arts classes to meet the needs again of all, some, and one. We've looked at that, we talked about formative assessment, we've talked about developing those work and study skills and the goals, and teachers also use what's called the gradual release of responsibility. In the rooms here, and in the rooms across our district in language arts, you will see some whole group, not full hours of lecture. You'll see whole group instruction where teachers are demonstrating either their thinking, their reading, and their writing as proficient readers and writers, or they'll be sharing students' work as demonstrations of expectations. You'll see small group work, students coming together to be working on projects, or teachers checking in and gathering some of that formative assessment information, or having a very targeted objective that that group of students need based on the data that's already been assessed, evaluated, and providing that targeted or intensive instruction. You'll also see teachers pulling kids individually because the teachers have looked at the student work and have planned ahead for conferences. Instead of sitting down with a student and having 15 teaching objectives, the teacher knows that this student needs this 1 or 2 very next steps that the student will then be able to take on and apply. So the teachers adjust their levels of support for new learning to occur within every episode of instruction. And then students use that environment where they're practicing what they've been learning. They're practicing the new skills from the targeted instruction or the whole group instruction or the conferencing that have occurred. They're working in groups, they're working independently. They're using their time as a learner in that classroom. That's their workspace and their work time. We have provided videos, I shouldn't say we, your teachers allowed us to go into their rooms and video so that you could see some of these in action. You can jot notes on what you're seeing. It'd be great for you to note. Where's the work and study skills being developed? How are teachers gathering those assessments? And what does that whole group, small group, and independent work time look like? And how are the teachers able to differentiate to meet the needs of the learners? Now to talk about, so where do we go from here? So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, moving on to high school. Many of your children will go either into Boulder High or to Fairview. We do have the teachers from both of those schools. Jonathan Wright from Boulder High will speak to the whole group, and then in the small breakouts, you'll have the luxury to meet with both teachers and ask your questions.
Thank you. I'm Jonathan Wright, and I teach at Boulder High. Right now I teach AP Lang and Comp. That's an advanced class to juniors. And I'm also the co-department chair at Boulder High. We've got Jamie, my colleague from Fairview here, but he and I met and we said, well, you know, what do you expect at Fairview? He went through a list of things. Well, that's what we expect at Boulder. Turns out we had more or less the exact same thing to say, so it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to have two of us going back and forth saying the same thing. But I want to talk about really two things, because I think we're here about concerns about achievement and what is going to lead to the greatest amount of achievement for our students. And so what I want to talk about is, well, what leads to achievement? What are those practices? And then also, what sort of student characteristics lead to achievement? So what are the practices and what do the students have where that happens? And I always go to this guy, John Hattie, and he does what's called meta-studies. And a meta-study is studying studies. So if you had lots of studies about, well, what happens when we detract students? And, maybe this person did a study and another person, well, when we look at all of those, can we see a trend? And that would be meta-study data. Well, he looks at meta-studies of meta-studies, so he's a meta-meta-studier, I guess. So anyway, we have these huge studies. So he looked at 1,000 meta-studies, 50,000 studies over 240 million students to sort of figure out what works, what doesn't work. And so I just want to share just little bits about that quickly in the brief time about, okay, so what does work? What leads to achievement? And part of this is all about this effect size. In other words, what has an effect and more or less what has no effect. Well, it turns out just going to school is a good thing. So, going to school versus not going to school, you get an effect size by going to school. The effect size of just going to school, anywhere with any teacher, is somewhere between 0.2 and 0.4. So that really doesn't matter what happened. You're in a school, there's learning happening, there are kids learning, so boom, fine. Now, just having a brain and actually growing older, you get an effect size right up there, developmental effects, between 0 and 20. So you're going to grow just by, eating potato chips and playing your video games, I guess. But we don't really care about that, and we don't really care about the teaching one, because what we want is, well, how can we get even greater achievement? How does that happen? So how do you get to that zone of desired effects, where we get effects of 0.4 or more? So I just want to talk about a few of those to see kind of where we get that. Now, interesting, number one thing, students reporting their own grades. Students like, woohoo, straight A's. Well, no, it's not that easy. I mean, they have to have actually criteria. What is that criteria for an A? This is what A work looks like. These are the things it would have, and I have lots of examples of what A work looks like, and I can look at my work and I can see, I've done this, but I'm failing, I'm not doing this yet, here's my learning goals, move forward. When students can actually accurately assess their own work and decide where they need to move with their learning with a teacher's assistant, has a 1.44 effect size. 1 is 2 years, so 2 years gain versus the average 1 year in a standard year. So 1.44 off the chart. The other thing that has a really big effect size, I believe it's 0.75 there, is just getting good and timely feedback. And that's a little bit of what we saw in the video, of just here's feedback on what you're doing, it's personalized, it's actionable, that sort of thing. So consistent feedback. We know that. Now, An interesting thing that came up in the research too, though, is just teacher credibility. You may think I just dressed up for you all tonight because I was presenting, but no, I actually dressed like this at school. Julie, our counselor, she can attest to it. You know, it's a pathetic attempt at credibility, I admit, but you know, I do what I can because I know that teacher credibility is a big thing. Now, there's a lot we do as teachers to make ourselves credible, you know, being organized, classroom management, knowing our material, all of those things. So I can do that. I can, you know, spend too much money on clothes. What I can't do, though, is necessarily control what other students say, who aren't in my class, who want to say, oh, he doesn't know anything, or what parents say about teachers. And then what the terrible thing that can happen is if a student doesn't believe their teacher is credible, they don't learn as much. They could be in the room with the greatest teacher on the planet, and if they don't think that teacher's credible, they're not going to learn. And in fact, just believing your teacher knows what they're doing, effect size of 0.9. So, you know, that is really big. I know, and I bring this up for obvious reasons, because I know there's a lot of discord in here, but I do, regardless of your beliefs and where you're standing on this, try to make sure that you're supporting the teacher in your student's mind, because they're going to learn more then. And, you know, whatever disagreements, I would try to keep them out of it, is why I bring that up. Low effect. Now, low effect does not mean negative effect. It just means it doesn't do much. So, low effect, class size. Teachers hate to hear that one. Guess what? You know, class size, it doesn't make that big a difference. We're talking like a class of 20 versus a class of 30. And students achieve about the same in either one. Doesn't make a big deal. Students like this one, oh, homework, not a lot of effect. You don't have to do it so much. It's not so good. Students like, woohoo, yeah. But the problem is that's not totally true, because once you get into high school, it actually does have a higher effect size. So as students get older, as long as the homework is targeted and it's practice and they already have knowledge about, then the effect size goes up to about 0.6. So as students get older, increasing levels of homework become helpful. The thing that brings us all here, right, is tracked or untracked classes. Here is what the research, 50,000 studies tell us. It doesn't have much effect on achievement. Detracking is not going to magically make everyone do better, but tracking and having those levels isn't going to magically make people do worse. So the effect size of that one is actually 0.12, tracking or detracking. It has the same effect of just not going to school at all. It doesn't matter so much. So fine, good. I'm hoping this is good news if you're worried my student is going to do well unless they're in an advanced level class. But it's maybe not, it's the panacea for students who maybe aren't doing well. Well, it's not the panacea either, but what it is it's a measure of equity. So what it does do is it doesn't have sort of this separate but equal sort of idea. It says, you know what, since it doesn't have an effect negatively on anyone, let's put everyone in there. And I think, when I was in my student training program, there was a little parable that I thought was cheesy at the time, but nevertheless it stuck with me. It's about this, there are all these starfish. So there's this old guy, and he's walking down to the beach, and he sees thousands of starfish on the beach. And the sun's beating down, and they're out of the water, and he sees this figure sort of off in the distance, sort of reaching down and doing something. And he comes upon this figure, and it's a small boy. The small boy is picking up a starfish and throwing it into the sea, and the man looks, son, what are you doing? There are thousands. You can't hope to make a difference here. They're going to dry up and die. And the boy looks down, picks one up, and throws it in and says, well, I made a difference for that one. And I guess that's what I would like you to consider when we think of this idea of tracking or not tracking. When we have all our students together, it harms no one, but perhaps it puts a student within the commerce of ideas who wouldn't have been there. And there may be that starfish that then ends up in my AP class at Boulder High who maybe wouldn't have, because they ended up, in a certain track of class that made them feel like they didn't have those skills. The research does not say that's going to happen frequently. but it could happen some, and it looks like a more equitable system. And your child won't be harmed by it. That's the major thing I wanted to mention. Now, that said, at high school we track. We have advanced classes. They have them at Fairview. They have pre-IB and IB, and they have AP. We, of course, are an AP focus school at Boulder High, so we have lots of AP and advanced. So you want to know, what are effective students in all advanced classes? And Jamie and I talked about this, and I've talked about this with lots of other teachers. And students who do well in advanced classes generally have several of these characteristics, not always all. They enjoy whatever it is they're in the advanced class in. Students who love and enjoy reading and writing are probably going to be fine in an advanced class for reading and writing because they love the discipline. It's kind of like that majoring. They have good student skills. They're motivated and responsible. You know, they do the work, they're motivated to do the work. They also self-advocate. This one is huge. So we have a thing, TAP, Teacher Access Period at Boulder High, and students will come in and ask for feedback on their essays. It's my best writers that often come in and say, you said I didn't explain my evidence well enough to sort of link it to the purpose, but I don't really see how I wasn't analyzing. And they'll sit down, I'll explain it, oh, I see, and they move forward. They didn't have to do that. They already had a B+ on the paper. But they want to know more. So self-advocating, never being satisfied with just the status quo and getting by. Huge skill for advanced learners. And look, intellectual capacity and curiosity matters. If you have an intellectually capable and curious kid, they'll probably be fine, is the bottom line. Now, specifically in LA, what do we need? We need, coming into high school to be in advanced class, you need to be able to read. You need to be able to read independently. You need to be able to be handed a novel that you may not like, that may be really boring and being written by an old white guy who died 100 years ago. And you need to be able to be handed that and said, okay, read 100 pages by Friday, and you need to be able to do it. That's one of the things that's going to be expected. And if the kid can't do that, they're going to have trouble. So they have to have sort of those skills in place. They need to be able to write confidently. You put sentences and ideas together and structure paragraphs to make some sort of cohesive statement about something. And that means informing, explaining, writing analytically, arguing, that sort of thing. They should like talking about ideas with other people. So they should be willing and able to talk about things with people. And again, I mentioned the analytical. That's big. Now, this gets to just yesterday at Boulder High. And the 9th grade team was talking, and they were having a conversation, and I walked into their room, and this is what they were talking about. How do we ensure that all our 9th grade students have access to pre-AP type information? And how do we make sure that we're not doing things in our 9th grade classes that aren't the advanced classes to make sure we're not excluding? So it's conversations we're having too. This is all I think about access and sort of that idea of course, do no harm. How do we do no harm while providing access to all? And of course, what I know Jamie, my colleague, wants at Fairview is what I want and we want at Boulder High, which is to have the most highly capable, motivated student body coming in that we can. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.